Hello, and welcome to Further Afield, a project which discusses and explores art and disability in rural spaces. My name is Bella Milroy. I'm a disabled artist based in my hometown of Chesterfield, North Derbyshire, and Further Afield is a project produced in collaboration between myself and Level Centre, who are a rurally based Arts Council England national portfolio organisation in Roseley, Derbyshire, just down the road from me. The project consists of a series of interviews with disabled artists, as well as research into the experiences of disabled artists in rural settings. It seeks to promote their work and learn about ways of making and producing art that aren't always offered the space or recognition that it deserves. All Further Afield interviews are available to watch on the Level Centre website, and an audio podcast version will also be available to listen to. There will be transcripts of all conversations. Go to levelcentre.com for more information about the project, access, and contributing artists. Further Afield is a project supported by Arts Council England, Level Centre, Shape Arts, Derbyshire Libraries, Harlem Art Space, Arts Derbyshire, and Wising Arts Centre. And just for a brief image description for you, for the audience, my pronouns are she, her, and I am a white woman in my early 30s with an oval face and round cheeks. I have pale white skin with short brown hair and round glasses. And for my environmental description, I'm working from home. There's a grey sofa with some cushions in the background and a couple of sleeping dogs and possibly a cat wandering around from time to time. Today, I am so lucky to have with me Natalie Sharp, a disabled artist based in Todmorden, West Yorkshire. Her creative journey traverses sound, vision, and costume, weaving together ambitious, interactive multimedia performances. Her artistic practice embraces composed sound, electronic music, video, performance, and lighting, all underscored by a profound commitment to body activism. At the heart of her work lies a dedication to accessibility and disability, intertwined with a passion for promoting queer-centred and intersectional approaches to environmentalism. So, Natalie, welcome. It's an absolute pleasure to have you as part of the series.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks. Thanks for that lovely description as well. My name's Natalie. My pronouns are she, her. My artist moniker is Nat Sharp, formerly known as Lone Taxidermist. And my visual description is I am a yellowy browny woman and I have a square face, kind of square face. I'm wearing very bright clothes. I've got a suitably bright hoodie on and my tracky bottoms because I've just been doing some Pilates. And I'm in my studio, my lovely terracotta studio. It's like my recording studio. And around me I can see lots of plants and a Nicolas Cage shrine. And out the window there's it's a bit grey and miserable, but I'm feeling bright on the inside.
Ah, that was such a fantastic description and a lovely introduction. Thank you so much, Natalie. Thank you. Well, maybe we can start by you just telling me a little bit about your work and what you're up to at the moment.
Yeah, sure. So, like as you introduced me, I do all kinds of art. So sometimes I like to call myself a janitor of art or an octopus artist because interdisciplinary just takes too long to say and it's sort of a bit too vague, really. So yeah, at the moment I'm doing a few really interesting things. After this interview, actually, I'm going to go and see one of my favourite filmmakers. He's an artist called Andrew Cotting. Have you heard of Andrew? Hey, back if you've heard of Andrew.
No, I have. Sadie, the dog, has. I have.
Right. Well, he's essentially a filmmaker, but he's a bit of a sort of an interrogator of the medium of film, and he did possibly like one of my favourite, like most important, meaningful films to me called Gallivant. with him and his daughter Eden, who is disabled, and she's got a form of neurodiversity that is quite rare. And he took his daughter and his grandma um, in the sort of 1994 around the coast of the UK, and he did this film about the coast of the UK through their eyes, and it's called Gallivant, and it was anyway. I went to he had a little Q&A screening up in Cumbria at the weekend, and he's now made this new work, which is a VR work, and it's about his house in the Pyrenees, which is like really dilapidated in the middle of nowhere, kind of impossible to get to, really isolated. So you sort of step into him and his daughter Eden's world via this VR headset, and it's a really interesting piece. So I'm on my way to see that, which doesn't really describe what I do, but I think I'm very kind of influenced by his work, and he's kind of in my mind's eye quite a lot at the moment. So that's why I sort of mentioned him.
No, that's a lovely way of giving us a little glimpse into some of the things that you're interested in at the moment. And like you say, living inside your head. That's lovely. Thank you. And I didn't know his work. Can you say his name again for me?
Yeah, he's called Andrew Cotting, Kotting, and he's a filmmaker, and he's done lots of films. He's done lots of stuff with like. He's kind of like the filmmaker's filmmaker, if that doesn't sound too pretentious. I'll leave it at that. I would encourage anyone to go and find his work, because it's really magical to see.
Lovely. Thank you so much. That I'll definitely be have a look into that. Thank you, Natalie. That was a really lovely introduction. Um, I'd love to start off by talking to you about your work, Mara. You were artist in residence for Ariel, a festival of contemporary music, literature, and performance taking place in the Lake District. And this residency resulted in this body of work called Mara. The work is described as a deeply personal reflection on growing up as a second generation immigrant in small town Cumbria, a lucid dream set against the arcane, esoteric rituals and traditions that bubble under the surface of everyday life. This work is so striking, and your performance recordings are just incredibly powerful to watch. Can you tell me a little bit more about this body of work and the process of creating it?
Yeah. So Mara kind of came about. I don't know if it was an accident or maybe it was like an intentional accident, but basically, I was approached ages ago, like before the pandemic, to write a new piece and perform a new piece of work about Cumbria, and I wanted to sort of like dig into the sort of the underbelly of the stuff that you don't know or you don't necessarily associate with Cumbria. Because, you know, when people think about Cumbria, they think about the Lake District and all of that, and like William Wordsworth and all of those people. But and also like there's always been like a big focus on the Lake District and not so much on like where I'm from, which is the northwest of Cumbria, and the whole of the west coast, really, you know, from like Whitehaven and Maryport all the way up the coast there. So I wanted to do something that sort of lifted and celebrated those kind of voices that you don't really hear of or sort of associate with Cumbria, but I wanted it to be like very personal as well. So it ended up, it's kind of always been continually in a state of change, but at the moment it's gone back to what its original form was, which is I'm now recording it as an album. But because the pandemic happened, the performance was put on hold, and I ended up handing over a series of short films, again very inspired by Andrew Cotting's work, particularly Gallivant, that was to do with all of these kind of strange esoteric rituals that you mentioned, but also like it's a bit of a call and response to the matriarchy of the Seychelles, which is where my mum and brother come from. So yeah, it ended up being like a sort of a short mini TV series. And then it went back to being a performance when the restrictions kind of lifted, and now it's an album, or it's about to be an album. So, so it's sort of done lots of things, and it's been like I think it's one of those things where it's like maybe it'll never be over. This work, it'll just kind of keep sort of congealing and changing. So yeah.
It's I mean, I think it feels like a work that has the capacity to do that. It feels so there are so many, like, you describing yourself as an octopus of art. It feels like there are so many tentacles
Yeah.
amongst it that like could expand and contract at various points depending on your response to it. So that would be so interesting to hear the album when that comes out.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know when that's going to be, but hopefully, I mean, it was supposed to be like 2 years ago, and then I don't know, things just keep time just keeps being weird, and other things keep happening. So yeah, it'll come out when it comes out.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely find crypt time versus pandemic time is just like,
Yeah.
what is that? Um, great. Well, I'd like to talk to you a bit more about a project you're currently working on, titled Spume, which you describe as a radical departure from conventional performance norms. Spume transcends the boundaries of art and ecology. Central to this venture is the transformative act of lying down horizontally, a deliberate choice symbolizing interconnectedness with the coastal landscape, where Sellafield meets Ravenglass in Cumbria. This unconventional performance mode, challenging orthodoxies, becomes an embodied narrative of symbiosis, mirroring the exchange between sea algae and land fungi, embodying the interconnectedness between my Seychellois heritage and Cumbrian roots. Can you tell me a little bit more about this really fantastic sounding project?
Yeah, so a spume was kind of like almost a bit of a response to Mara in a way, because I've done like a few performances of Mara, even though the album's not out. And what I kind of realised is that I can't continue to mentally and physically continue to perform in such a way. So I decided to sort of take up the act of lying down, almost as in itself as a form of activism. But I think body activism is like quite kind of central to a lot of my work. Like placing your body in the is always been like central to the whatever art form I'm kind of projecting outwards. So it. Initially, Spume started off, again, it was a commission for new work, and I got a bit of seed funding through Sound UK. And when it first started, it was a very different sort of like beast to what it is now, because initially I wanted to build a kind of a giant coiling seashell that was like a receiver and a transmitter, so a transceiver that took the form of a seashell, kind of like a listening device that would live, listening and transmitting device that would live on the coastlines of both Cumbria and the Seychelles. That's not to say it won't happen. It's just that, like, I think that would need, a huge amount of funding, project grant, So from that, I ended up going back to Ravenglass, which is this really sort of weird magical place, and I spent 2 months there pretty much with no phone signal or internet, with the intention of writing Mara. But I ended up just making this pilgrimage to the water, to like surrender my body to the ocean. Pretty much every day I'd make a pilgrimage to the water. and what came out of it was like this fascination with that bit of liminal space that you mentioned, the sort of the potential or the vestibule of that whole area where the sea meets the land. And my mum from the Seychelles kind of came to represent the seaside and the sand, and my dad, being a Morse code engineer, came to represent the ocean, and I was kind of dancing between the liminal of both of those spaces and in a kind of like push and pull type situation. But I didn't want to do it standing up, so I sort of started to envision this whole mode of being horizontal, because being horizontal to me felt like I was more in tune with the landscape, which is a horizon. And so it came, I started doing this like body act of horizontalism. So now spume has become a sort of a full sensory exploration of the act of lying down, and performing lying down, but in also inviting audiences to sort of join me in being horizontal and what that could be and how that could feel. And I kind of now am sort of more gearing towards making an indoor installation that will potentially tour. I'd like to do it around the coastlines, but just doing it in venues that kind of understand and support, and like, you know, those sort of soft spaces that would lend themselves to the project. So yeah. And spume, a lot of people say to me, well, what is spume? So spume is that like weird bubbly, a sort of gluttonous looking sea foam. And it's, have you ever seen spume like in person? Yeah. So it's like, oh, you just want to get inside it. And the reason that spume happens, and I suppose this is the other thing about being in the UK as well, and about being in a rural area for me, like, is that it's caused by, basically, like, the way I see it is like the sea gets really angry, and it sort of basically, when there's a storm, it takes all of the like dead algae matter from the ocean and it chucks it up and it spits it out on the coastline. And like all of that stuff is like the detritus of what used to be in the sea, but it's like it's all the good stuff as well. Like it's sort of like the history in a way. It's like a kind of a little history of the sea happening on the coastline. So yeah, I'm into it.
Yeah, that's such a lovely kind of visual kind of imagery to end that kind of initial snapshot of spume there. Thank you so much. I was so interested in the way you talk about this particular project, in how engaging directly with the potential of what lying down offers when used as a creative material in itself.
Yeah.
And you talk about this saying, and as you've already kind of referred to, that like lying down becomes a form of resistance and inclusivity, serving a dual purpose. It becomes a protective measure for my well-being, allowing me to sustain a career that has until now grappled with the demands of live music performance. I was so drawn to the way you described that lying down both as a creative inspiration and a protective measure. Could you share a bit more with me about how this creative shift came about and how it has informed your creative practice going forward?
Yeah, so lying down it's sort of, I think I associate lying down also, like, to add to that, with a sort of a softness and a safeness and a, like you said, like a protective measure. And so just the act of lying down is kind of like, okay, well, that makes my body kind of release itself, and I'm not so tense, because if I'm lying down, I imagine that I'm, you know, I'm in bed, or I'm in like a kind of a safe zone in a way. So it's sort of, I've never really to be honest with you, like it's even though I've been performing, like stood up for years, I've I've never I've never felt comfortable doing it, and so it just seemed like a really, like, oh well, this is like an actually a really easy solution in a way to all of that. It's just like, well, I won't perform standing up anymore. I'll lie down, and I'll invite others to do the same. And I think in lying down, it completely does shift your whole experience. And so, like, now with, especially with Spume, I'm thinking about, like, well, how do I play instruments lying down? Or is there like a is there a sort of an, what is the like ultimate ergonomics of lying down, to like listen to sound, to see sound, to perform sound? Like, what would those elements be? So what's kind of ended up happening is that I'm now thinking of like really sort of lateral, like interesting creative ways to perform lying down, because like sometimes when you're at a gig and the person's on a laptop and it just looks like they're sort of, you can't see what they're doing. And even if they're playing synthesizers or whatever, and you're like, well, I can't see what you're doing. So, and I just sort of like, well, in this way, it's like the other part of it is that it takes the sort of, I don't really want the spotlight to be on me anyway. Like I want the work to be sort of experienced, but it's not, I suppose it's again in line, or like it's sort of parallel with nature, is that like there's no ego in nature, and so like I don't want to have an ego with any of this work. So like by everyone lying down, their gaze is kind of elsewhere, or their focus is elsewhere. So I think just the act of lying down, it's like opened up all of these new ways of thinking about like what performance could be, you know.
And it sounds like as well, like the more you kind of center that as a format, you are it becomes less about how you apply a kind of you know standing non-disabled kind of script of how a live performance happens, and applying and trying to make lying down happen on top of that, but more actually kind of completely reconfiguring the format to centering that kind of horizontal experience at the heart of it, which I think is always so wonderful when access can be centered in that way. The creative possibilities that come through that are really exciting, aren't they?
Yeah, totally. And like, it's not to say that, like, I know that loads of other artists have done, performances that have been about lying down, but they tend to be more about like there's like lots of sleep concerts and stuff like that. But I think with this, it's more like, well, let's completely rearrange the whole experience around the act of lying down, if you like. So that's the focus of it instead.
Yeah. And has further embracing your experience of disability in this way and finding a more accessible way of producing work, has that facilitated a greater sustainability in your artistic career?
Yeah, totally. Because I think like I suppose in a way it kind of gives you the power, because it's like, well, this is what I'm going to do, and this is what works for my body. So I'm going to invite you along for the ride, and in having that power, it gives you, it just gives you the sort of the impetus, I suppose, to like sort of forge your own way of being and your own way of doing things that is more sustainable. Yeah.
And I imagine that kind of shift as well would kind of lead you to other artists and other performers who are also working in similar ways that are incorporating those kind of crucial access points like that, and innovative ways of performing amongst that. That must has that led you to?
Yeah, yeah, totally. Like I've done a lot of work with an artist, a neurodivergent artist called Wando Abizier, and the last project that we did together was specifically for deaf disabled audiences, and it centered their experience. The main sort of performer in it is a BSL artist who uses really interesting somatic movement in her BSL. She's called Chisato, and then the experience itself was done with a series of videos that I made that were projected onto very large balloons that were filled with helium, because we learned through the process that other deaf audiences, their bodies respond really well to, they can feel sound basically through the balloon. So and then on top of that, there's been a lot of other artists along the way. I've been working with an amazing artist called Lou Barnell as well, who she actually just did her sort of like zenith performance at the weekend at the Theatre Delhi in Sheffield. But yeah, I think I'm just like more drawn towards these people anyway. It's sort of, I feel like it just has happened in a really like natural way anyway. It's just sort of, like when you start putting out that feeling of being horizontalism, you end up working with other people that kind of resonate with it in a way. So yeah.
Oh yeah, totally. I think when that shift happens, it's like I only want to ever be over here doing this,
Yeah, totally.
And has there been some things that have supported you to make this shift happen in your work? Have there been any particular arts organisations, collectives, or opportunities that have really helped in this way?
Yeah, I mean, obviously outside of speaking to you as well, because this is all very helpful, just having the time and the space to talk about it. But yeah, also, excuse me, there's been so Full of Noises up in Cumbria have been really big supporters of my work for a really long time. That's kind of basically how I was given the time and space to just be in the landscape, and that was hosted by another organisation that's run by someone that's become a friend of mine called Bob, and he runs Redrift. So, and the way that they work is that like basically they nurture artists, but it's not about like a new commission or making new work or like any kind of like timeline. They basically are like, okay, we're here for you, we'll do whatever you need us to do, and we're not going anywhere, so just tell us what you want and we will seek to provide you with it. So like they're amazing people as an organisation, but just as people as well, and they're up in Cumbria, which is great. Yeah, and I mean there's been quite a few, like Sound UK have been amazing, and there's an organisation called Interior Motive who have helped me with getting DYCP funding. There's probably quite a few, but I can't think of names now that I'm being asked. But yeah, there's quite a few.
It's wonderful to know that because I think what I'm hearing in the way you describe this shift, there's a kind of urgency to it in no longer being able to sustain that a previous kind of format of performing. And quite often as disabled artists we can find ourselves at our limits, and the sustainability of our work is really put into there's a real kind of vulnerability to our work continuing. The personal cost of how we work is often so great, isn't it? And that's wonderful to know that you've had such positive and supportive experiences with organizations like that. That's great.
Yeah, totally. And it's also like it gives you the kind of the courage in a way to be like, okay, well, here's my access rider. These are the things that I need in order to do this performance, because it sort of validates what you do in a way. When you're supported so like wonderfully. So yeah, in a way, it's a kind of it's like a real sort of boost or momentum to that you're on the right path kind of thing.
Absolutely. Oh, that's fantastic. I'm so pleased that that's been a positive shift for you in that way. I'd really like to talk to you about a project you're currently working on, which is a sensory installation and community project in Cumbria, and it's aimed at neurodivergent, autistic, and learning disabled adults. Could you share a little bit more about this project and what it's been like returning to where you grew up in Cumbria to make work in this way?
Yeah, totally. So, like, what we were saying before about like how you end up sort of manifesting these organizations into your life. I feel like in doing Spume, that must be what kind of happened, because I kind of got an email out of nowhere, about this organisation who are relatively new. They've just actually rebranded themselves, so they're now called Everything Here, which I think is an acronym on which is what a lot of people from Cumbria say. So Everything Here is it's part of the sort of creative people and places, but it's like the Northwest division of that. So like how the Arts Council have been trying to like siphon all of the money out of London and take it up north a bit more. So like a big chunk of it's gone to the Northwest, which is really good news as far as I'm concerned, or like my locals are called kind of concerned, my comrades. So so they've kind of been set up out of that, but what they want to do is like hand over the reins to the actual people of Cumbria. So they've set up this kind of citizens assembly, and the way I understand it is it's a bit like sort of Camelot, where like it's an egalitarian approach where everyone kind of gets a say, and it's sort of like I imagine them all sort of meeting around like a round table, and it's a total like pure democracy kind of situation. And part of the kind of remit of Everything Here was like, okay, there's two areas that Cumbria needs to cover in its arts and culture, and that is LGBTQI communities and learning disabled communities, because they're the two areas, or the two marginalised communities who are just not getting a platform and not getting a voice. So the work that I'm doing with them centres learning disabled and autistic neurodiverse people, like you said, adults, and it's taking place in West Cumbria, hopefully at West Lakes College, which has quite a large student community of learning disabled adults audiences that are going to do experience this work. And so at the moment it's called a sensory worlding experience, and it is the space is going to be divided into all of the different sensory zones, so listening, sounding, hearing, touching, smelling, tasting. And the audiences will be invited into the zones to experience those zones, but there'll be like a crossover between the zones, like a sort of an interconnectedness, and they'll be able to travel through the zones and have very sort of, I'm hoping, quite visceral kind of unique experiences in each zone. And so just to sort of talk you through what the zones might look like. So when you enter the space, there'll be like a giant maypole in the middle, and it will have ribbons on it, and those ribbons will correlate to the zone that the audience member might want to go to. So for example, if they take a silver ribbon, they'll go to the sounding zone, and in the sounding zone there'll be lots of like mirrors and reflections, and there'll be microphones hanging from the ceiling, that they're able to make a noise through, and they'll be able to again lie down on the floor, which will be made of clouds, and yeah, they'll be able to sort of make a sound in that room, and then when they go into the tasting zone, for example, that's the pink area, so they'll take a pink ribbon, and there'll be a giant Puffalump, which is my teddy bear. He's called Puffalump. And Puffalump doesn't stand up, he lies down, like that's yeah, so he's like, so I want to make a costume that is impossible to stand up in, and it's like a giant Puffalump essentially it's a sleeping bag, but it's huge, so you can get inside this teddy bear, and the teddy bear will like hand out pink candy floss, and there'll be pink smoke, and you'll be able to sit on pink clouds and eat popcorn and get ready for like a party to happen. So that's just like a little taster of what it might be. But yeah, so, and again, that's an organization that I should like, that I really want to champion and support, because working with them has kind of like made me kind of realize why, like it's kind of like totally changed the way that I work. So like, for example, as you know, like I don't do like video Zoom calls, so they made it possible for me to travel to them or them travel to me, and we'd all be in the space together. So that would be me, Kieran, one of the directors, and Unique Spencer, who is an access worker. And we would use our bodies to come up with the ideas. So we would do these like body-in like somatic exercises. And to me, like doing stuff like that is like just way more fulfilling and satisfying. And there's so many other ways that the project can go, or directions it can go into, just through like working with people like that, because they just get it. And, you know, like they'll say stuff like, you know, if money was no option, what would you do in this zone? So like they've kind of made it like limitless and boundaryless. And so that's allowed my imagination to like really like be like, okay, well, let's make like a giant Puffalump and eat candy floss and all of this kind of stuff. And so yeah, the whole experience so far has just been, it's been really beautiful, and I'm like really, really enjoying working on it. And I don't know, I just feel like this is the direction, this is the trajectory that I want all work to kind of live inside and go towards, really.
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. That's you know, that's a source of great inspiration to make the work happen, but also in the collaborative process in itself, actually being like so fulfilling and furthering your practice at the moment, your way of working.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing about that. I'd love to talk to you about where you're now based, which is in Todmorden in the Upper Calder Valley in Calderdale in West Yorkshire. I wanted to give the full definition there.
Do you know what Todmorden means?
No, I don't. Please tell me.
Todmorden, it's actually quite morbid. Todmorden translates in Germanic as double deaf dead, which is kind of interesting considering what a sort of strange and unique area it is. Like, it's the UFO capital. Yeah. There's been lots of goings on here. There's a policeman called Alan Godfrey that famously in these parts got abducted by aliens. And it's a very beautiful but unusual landscape, and I feel like it draws certain kind of spirits towards it. Like there's lots of witches and pagans that live here. It's like a very sort of it's just a really unique place, Todmorden. So I ended up making roots here. I've got a house, which I can't believe I own a house. It still doesn't seem it doesn't seem possible, as a self-employed, starving artist or whatever who's lived in London for most of my life. So I've made roots here, and like one of the reasons that I ended up making roots here was because of the landscape. So yeah, going back to like spume and lying down and stuff. One of the sort of big. I'm going to call it like an achievement that I've made for my body is that I've been able to sort of dunk it inside cold water and kind of come out reborn in a way. That sounds a little bit holy, but like it really is like the water around here and getting inside the water around here has really, really healed my body. So yeah, that was sort of like one of the big draws of this area. So yeah.
Oh, that's such I love the description you've given there of Todmorden and what the atmosphere and the space is like. Maybe you could tell us like what's it like being an artist there? What are some of the positives of working as a disabled artist? Obviously the environment and the landscape itself. And but perhaps what are some of the challenges as well of being
Yeah. Yeah, totally. So like I think being an artist here is it's great because you're surrounded by lots of other artists, like there seems to be like a real sort of intrigue and draw for people, especially during the pandemic. A lot of people who couldn't afford Manchester or wanted to be in the landscape ended up moving here. And even people from like, Hebden Bridge who were kind of have been priced out of Hebden Bridge have moved here. So we've got kind of quite a unique, gene pool of people. And so, yeah, it's great being an artist here. I've got a studio down the road that I share with a really good mate. There's tons of good art that happens as well. Like there's a amazing venue called Nanmuir's in the middle of Todmorden, and they're an independent venue and like a grassroots venue, and they run all kinds of stuff from like they have like non-binary queer DJs pretty much every Sunday, and they do Scrabble night, and they do like build your own synthesizer night, and they have like Madonna karaoke and plop karaoke. Like it's just like a really like sort of Willy Wonka or like a funhouse type space. So, having spaces like that. And also the other thing I should say is that everyone's just up for it. So, like when I moved out of London, it's like, okay, we're going to have to make our own fun. And so like I said to the people that run Nans is that I love Funhouse. So like, can we do a version of Pat Sharp's Funhouse in Nanmuir's? And so I ended up filling the place with slime, and we were doing sheep shearing and like all this like, so yeah, all of that stuff's like, it feels like anything could be possible here, or anything is possible. Like it's just like you make and you build your own fun, but it's not without its challenges. Like the landscape itself is hard and it's cold, and I have arthritis, and so like it's it's always damp here, so it's like it's terrible for that. It's really steep, like it's in a valley, so like just walking around is hard, and like some days I just can't do it at all. It can get quite, if you allow it, it can get quite isolating here as well. Like especially in the winter months, it feels like nothing's open. Like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, like nout's open apart from the supermarket. So it can feel quite sort of solitary sometimes. And I love solitude, but I don't want it 3 days of the week during the winter. So yeah.
And that's wonderful that that amongst those challenges there is a kind of an essential creative community that you feel you can be a part of. Can you like articulate or give us any kind of indication of what makes that accessible for you? What makes that something that feels like you've kind of got on board, and here you are as a part of it. What makes that possible, do you think?
Well, as in, like, what makes it possible within Todmorden?
Like what makes that creative community feel so so present and so and also so feasible for you to be included in that as the disabled artist?
I think it's to do with the people here. Like, I also think that, like, Todmorden is a bit of a, well, it's definitely a queer utopia, but it feels like a matriarchy here as well, a bit like the Seychelles. And so, like, you're surrounded by, I feel like I'm surrounded by people that allow it and sort of like own it and make it sort of possible. And because you're around those kinds of people, they sort of, their enthusiasm or their like willingness sort of rubs off on you. So it's more like, I was going to say it's a state of mind, but I know that sounds really cheesy, but it just sort of is. It's sort of like, there's just like a real belief, I suppose. And, you know, like, there's some really, but like, am I allowed to swear? There's some really like batshit bonkers people here as well. Like, I've got a mate whose porn star name is Heidi Priestess, but her real name's Haley, and I've never like met anyone as like singular or like unique as her before. Like, she needs her own TV show, you know, like and I think it's just like being around these sort of like alternative thinkers is that's kind of basically what it is. I would say it's to do with the people.
Yeah. That's so interesting. I mean, I don't know if this is something I shared with you, but when we first spoke over the phone in preparation for this interview, but like I always like to kind of say like an informal title for Further Afield as a project is like where are the weirdos?
Yeah. Come to Todd's, yeah.
That's what I need to do. I need to spend more time in Todd.
Yeah.
No, it's just that's really just so interesting to hear more about that artistic community there, and kind of wanting to kind of engage in kind of art and experiences that don't kind of fit into a prescribed expectation of what the countryside embodies in that way. I think that's thank you so much for sharing about that.
Yeah, I've just remembered as well, someone that I met a while ago described it, and this person's American, they described it as a queer Sesame Street, which I thought was a really accurate description. Yeah.
Wow, that's like such a strong set. That gives such a strong sense, I think, with like that's perfect.
Yeah.
Brilliant. And so also you are a member of Ebor Studios,
Yeah.
which is in Littleborough, which is is that the next town over from you?
Pretty much, yeah. It's like two train stops along from Todmorden, yeah, going towards Manchester.
Okay. And just for audiences, Ebor Studios is an artist-led organisation that provides exhibitions, events, and workshops via a contemporary gallery, community garden, and public arts programme. Could you tell me a little bit about what's it like being a part of Ebor Studios?
So yeah, Ebor's great. It is. I've been there pretty much, I think maybe for the whole time pretty much that I've lived up here. I've had a space at Ebor, and because it's artist run, again it goes back to this whole sort of democracy egalitarian system, which I'm really down with. So for example, like I'm on the board for the events committee, so we get to decide what the gallery space gets used for. And then we have an amazing program manager who's also an incredible artist, called Marianne, who runs a really brilliant program and sort of, does a lot of fundraising and stuff for EBO, and what it means is that I was, me and a bunch of other artists were able to use the gallery space for a month to just have a think about our work, and get paid for it as well. So yeah, I was in the gallery space, which is called Gallery Frank. It's named after the granddad who's dead now, but that was his. It was oh god, I don't even know what it was. I think it was a woodworking space. Anyway, so I was in Gallery Frank for like a month, working out the spume performance and what it might be. So just to be in like a 3D space, you're able to like spatially design and understand the world that you're trying to create much better. And I opened it up as a kind of presentation for anyone. They could come into the Gallery Frank, take the shoes off. You've got popcorn and herbal tea, but the whole floor was covered in recliners and soft foam floors, and I even brought a bed into there as well. There was like a reading room, which was all spume based, and people could just any of the EBO, or even people from outside, could come in and take the shoes off and just lie and be in the space. And there on the ceiling there was like a sea, like the ceiling is the sea basically, that was projected onto. And in this instance, it was like just this like really thin plastic stuff that decorators use when they're painting walls to keep things clean. And I use that because I mean I've had it for ages and I wanted to like recycle it, but it sort of sounds a bit like the sea. So like when you lie down in the floor in there, you're able to like look above and see the sea, and it would have watery projections on it. And so EBO is really good at like fostering and sort of allowing artists to come in and use the space. And it basically like it's a place where I can go and experiment with different ideas that I'm having. And sort of next to the gallery, I have my studio, and I share that with another musician, composer, artist person called Sophie Cooper. And yeah, so I've got like a desk space in there as well. And to be fair, I haven't really been there that much because I've been in where I am right now at home in my sound studio, which needs to be like a kind of a quiet, acoustically healthy space. So again, this is another joy of like getting out of London and living in a place like Todd, is that like I'm able to afford, to have two studios in London is just like, I'm not, that wouldn't be possible for someone from my background. So EBO's great, and like they fill it with really great artists as well. And it's like a really sort of rich program of stuff, and they've got a billboard project outside, so there's like an always forever changing billboards, and like you said, a really beautiful community garden where they have like beekeeping workshops, and yeah, it's brilliant. I love it, and I should go down there more, really, but I'm not going to give myself a hard time for not being there.
And does EBO, do you feel like EBO engages specifically? Does it feel like it engages with its rural surroundings and the creative communities that are based there? Do you feel like they do that in a particularly interesting way? Is there any kind of points of that make that particularly accessible for disabled artists?
So I think that just the nature of it being where it is just inherently makes it a place where you can go and engage with the rural setting that it's in, because it's just on the very edge of the Calder Valley. There's quite a few artists in there as well that are very much sort of thinking of the landscape and the environment. Like there's one artist who is a forager and does a lot of sort of traditional Yorkshire, Lancastrian folk songs. There's another artist who I think I already mentioned called Mary Ann, who is also autistic, I think, or neurodivergent, I should say, and she makes work around there's a lot of mills around here, so she's been making work around called Any Work That Wanted Doing, I think, and it's about using old mill machinery and tape loops to sort of like remember, or like as a form of like remembering the sort of the mill history of this whole area. In terms of accessibility, I think they're trying their best, but it's like a bit of a kind of work in progress. So like they have ramps and they have a disabled toilet, and the whole of the ground floor and the garden is accessible. However, the upstairs floors are not accessible because it's stairs, and you know they've put in handrails. And I mean, even stuff like I can't be in environments with fluorescent strip lighting, so like I've, you know, there's stuff like that I will say to them, you know, make sure that there's no strip lights on in these areas, and they're very, you know, they're really understanding and accommodating of those things. But with the nature of the building, with it being an old mill, it's like and with them being like an independently ran organization, yeah, so like they're doing as much as they can, but I always think there's more that can be done with everything like this. So, you know,
but that's interesting that they're aware and open to that, and you know, I guess you know, inviting you to spend a month making a project like Spume, talking about wanting to make art lying down, like engaging with disabled artists and the value of their making and the ways in which they make, I think is just one of the most incredible things that organizations can do in terms of the learning and the investment in their own infrastructures into how to better support artists in general. I think is surely simply your presence there, you know, the work you're making, hopefully that has a positive impact in their ways of doing things.
Yeah, I think it does. And I think like you know, there are other disabled and neurodiverse artists at Ebor as well, and like some of them are making work about that as well. So it is, yeah, I think they're really like open and up for it, I would say.
Well, it's been really interesting hearing you talk about Todmorden and where you're based and Ebor, and the kind of ways in which that's facilitated a different level of accessibility within your making that perhaps hasn't been there since before you moved there. Would you say that's right?
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree, and I think it's more that also, like, I would say I almost haven't really had the capacity or the language for it until I moved up here. And again, until the pandemic, really. Like, there was probably like a big part of me that I wouldn't have even had the gumption or the confidence to self-describe my, you know, as a disabled body. You know, I would just say, well, I have these forms of chronic pain, but like I think moving out of London and coming up here and the pandemic happening and all of that, and the just the act of slowing down is like, oh, okay, so yeah, this is where I'm at, and this is what's going on for my body, and you know, so yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful that's facilitated that for you. It's really generous of you to share. Thank you so much. So you connected with this project via an open call to connect with global majority disabled artists who were rurally based. just for audiences, the open call aimed to reach excuse me, the open call aimed to reach artists, learn about their practices, and gain a deeper understanding of how they cope, survive, thrive in rural settings. We wanted to make sure that that global majority artists were included in this work as part of the project's mission to broaden the current understanding of what the countryside embodies, who experiences it, and what kind of art is made there. Would you kindly share your thoughts about what this process was like for you?
Yeah, so the process was fairly straightforward. I found out about it on Instagram, and there was a site, I don't know if you've even heard of them, called, I mean, I don't really like the name. It's called Starving Artists Opportunities, and they advertised it, so I clicked on their link. But in order to see so there's a bit of irony here, because in order to see the opportunity, you click on the link of Starving Artist Opportunities, and then it takes you to a page that's like, well, you've got to pay to see this opportunity. So I was like, okay, this is kind of continuing the starving artist sort of aesthetic, if you like. So I just did a bit of digging, and I found, well, on the top of it said further afield at level. So I was able to find it on the website directly, and that's how I applied for it. So once I applied for it, it was relatively straightforward. Yeah.
And do you feel like this was a useful or meaningful way of connecting with global majority artists? And you can speak really freely here. That's yeah.
Yeah, totally. Like I would say, so like I tend to like go for things that like really sing to me. So like I think it mentioned about it being in a rural setting, and also being a disabled artist. So I thought, well, I'll definitely go for that, because it's, you know, those are the things that I am, and it's very much like especially Spume is very much about those things as well. So it's like, okay, well that's a bit of a no-brainer, really. I would say though, like more sort of broadly speaking, when arts institutions and organisations put up listings and they just put open call, I feel like the onus is on us to sort of do the work, if you like, and we're the ones that kind of end up having to sort of like put together an application, and you're not getting paid for that time. And if you are learning disabled or autistic, or however, it might be more difficult for you to do those things. And I know a lot of institutions say, well, you can do a video application, but again, that might not be something, I'm not able to do a video application. So yeah, I would say that like the nature or the sort of the language can be a bit of a boundary when institutions put up, they use phrases like open calls or like pitches or stuff like that. It's like, oh, okay, this is going to involve like work that I'm not going to get paid for, and however many people are going to apply for this, I might not even stand a chance, and I might not even get any feedback. And it's like, well, that's just free labour, happening. So yeah,
it's really challenging, isn't it, with that kind of wanting to respond to things that like float your boat, that you're interested in, that you think would be appropriate, and then also recognizing the amount of time and labor and which goes unpaid. I think that was really helpful feedback on that process. I think part of what we included in that was people that applied, people that shared their information with us are going to receive copies of books from people who are part of the program.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah, so you will be getting someone who shared with us via the open call. There'll be a book on its way to you, as a small token of appreciation of the unpaid work that goes into that. But even then, that's like you really it needs to be more streamlined. It needs to be more straightforward.
Yeah.
It's definitely something that going forward, I'd like to kind of carry out I'd love to be able, like I say, be able to streamline that, and find other ways of reaching people we don't know about that don't necessarily require a lengthy form or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think it's like making the process of application as streamlined as possible. Like in the last sort of 3 weeks or so, I've done, like, I would say maybe 4 more applications. So I've done quite a lot. Didn't get 2 of them. They're not able to provide any feedback, and it's just sort of like it's I think I'm maybe a bit better at handling rejection now with all of that kind of stuff. But it's still too much. It's still like too much work. So the more streamlined, or like, just, I don't know, maybe like the easier, or like the sort of the nicer the experience of applying, the better, really. Yeah, there's I'm sure that there are ways, like, offering a book, or offering just more, like, so that the people applying don't have to do all of the work for free would be good.
Yeah. Yes, I think that I agree with all of it. Thank you for sharing your kind of experience of what that was like, and it was wonderful coming across your work through that, even with the flaws of that initial open call. When working in curatorial roles, when I'm collaborating with art organisations, I'm always really trying to strive to ensure that I can trust the art orgs I work with to offer the most accessible and flexible and hopefully enjoyable working experiences possible for disabled artists. That's something I'm really try and do, as much as I possibly can. But it's really hard to know how to trust whether or not arts organisations are genuinely invested in wanting to make things better for the marginalised artists they work with. And it can sometimes feel like those seemingly good intentions are just hollow and tokenistic, and they actually fail to invest in the process of working with these artists in a meaningful and supportive way, and often with really harmful consequences. And I'd like to ask you, what signals do you need to get to know that this is a space or an opportunity or an organisation that you can trust in this way? What are some of the things you need to?
Yeah, it's so important. I feel like this is like the most important question in a way. Yeah, so what signals? I mean, it kind of comes down to whoever the person is, whoever your point of contact is, and who you're dealing with, and like what their forms of communication are. So, like, for example, with everything here, I knew that they were good people to work with when they were like, I said to them, oh, well, I don't do Zoom, so like they didn't even bat an eyelid or ask anything. They were just like, okay, well, let's make this possible. And they were like, okay, so obviously, like, we'll pay for your transport or whatever, and I sent them through my access rider and all of that kind of stuff, and we had like a meeting in person, and it was just having the initial meeting in person just made it so much more personal. Like, so I think it's to do with like whether the people within the organisation who are your point of contact are able to really like listen and really understand what your needs might be and work with them, and just and almost also like harness them. Like, another really good example is there's a place over an art space over in Newcastle called Cobalt Studios, who work in a similar way, really. Like they make sure that everyone eats together before a performance, and they make sure that there is like enough rest time before, during, and after, and like they'll proactively like ask you, like, you know, what are some of the things that you think you might need, and just simple stuff like, you know, checking into on like, you know, what your energy levels are like, and so stuff like that. And I think you end up just having a bit of an instinct, or a bit of a sort of a noose for, like, you know, are you a decent human being or not? It's sort of like, and again, like, I don't know whether you can do that so much over like a video call, but I think you can get, like, you can just get a vibe for someone's like energy, you know, when you meet them. Like, you just get a good vibe from them. So I think a lot of it is that you just have to kind of go with your gut, really. Your gut instinct.
And that's, I think, if you only hear that expression on a surface level, it can that can be, you know, yeah, go with your gut. Okay, cool. Actually, that's such a powerful thing for disabled people to do, isn't it? Because we live in a non-disabled world that tells us we're wrong and bad every day, and tells us that to go against our gut every day. And I think kind of like you know, thinking about listening to that gut instinct of how this experience is you know, coming across, and how these people are coming across to you is like a really powerful kind of thing to be really mindful of as disabled artists. I think that it's really, really difficult to actually kind of act upon, because it's so hard, especially in really challenging work environments. But it is that's kind of trusting that gut instinct.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, it's sort of, I don't know, so yeah, I mean, it's almost like you could sort of treat it like a dating profile in a way. Like, you just in not just in the sense that, like, I don't know, you can kind of like understand someone's like atmosphere and mood and like vibe from like checking out their profile or whatever. It's sort of the same when like someone gets in touch or like reaches out to you. You're like, okay, do I like this person's vibe? You know, like, I'm not like, am I attracted to them? But just like, you know, are they a good human being? Like, it's just a human connection, you know, and that's kind of all you can do, really, is like just leave it to your body to tell you what to do next.
Yeah, I think, and again, I think it's one of those really overlooked, you know, and it's something that you and I talked about when we first spoke about that kind of like the overlooked, you know, nature of the communications of a collaboration, and how that comes about, and like just the difference it can make when you get an email from someone who is really speaking the same kind of language as you. It's so powerful, and it transforms a collaborative experience like that. And I think organizations and lots of, you know, other kind of collaborative things maybe forget that actually, you know, just an email alone can make or break something in a really positive way.
Yeah, totally. And it's also about, like, I guess, being an ally and sort of like being close to making sure that there are people within the organisation that have some kind of lived experience as well, I think, because then they just inherently get it, you know. So yeah.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing with me about that, and also knowing that there are some really positive experiences that you're having of working with rural arts orgs. You know, everything here sounds fantastic, and I'm really excited to see what comes of that collaborative work you're making at the moment.
Yeah, totally. I'm excited too. I mean, I genuinely don't know how it's going to manifest at the moment, but like I don't feel anxious about it because, I just feel very like safe working with these people, so it's all good.
That's so great. That's exactly what you want. You want,
Yeah,
I feel like that's all I ever want to happen for disabled artists is to like, feel like the art you're making is inspiring and you're having a good time doing it and you're feeding
yeah,
each other and it's yeah, oh that's brilliant.
yeah.
Um Great. Well, I think I'd just like to finish off with just like a couple of last points. And I always have this as like a last point that feels really like, oh, it's just a little question, but it's quite a big question, really.
Is it a can of worms?
Yeah, probably a whole other podcast episode
Mm.
dedicated to that. But I guess maybe in the context of our conversation around Todmorden and, Todmorden being the queer Sesame Street that it is and your, really positive and accessible experience of that as a disabled artist within that creative community. What are the things that you think about when thinking about how we can foster more diverse creative experiences in rural spaces for both audiences and artists alike? What does that speak to you in that way?
Um, hmm. Oh, can you ask me that question again?
What do you think we that is needed to foster more diverse creative experiences in rural spaces for both audiences and artists alike?
Mm.
I say it's a pretty big
Yeah, it's a big question. I think that's why I'm struggling a bit. What is needed to foster more?
I guess if I think
Uh,
about, Todmorden the way it is, we shouldn't expect all rural spaces to be Todmordens. Every rural
yeah,
space is so different and offers the unique kind of nature of their creative communities. But I
yeah,
guess how could there are so many rural creative scenes that exist so exclusively on perhaps more expected artistic outputs like landscape painting and contemporary craft and things like that, and which is all really important parts of art making, but also sometimes hard to kind of like think about different kinds of art making that occurs in those spaces and how we could.
Yeah, I think it's to do with like again. It sounds a bit basic, but it does actually just come back to the people because the people who are like fire starters and who are like sort of leading by example just make more people want to kind of follow suit in a way. So it's almost like you need artists who are already doing these things in order to inspire other people and other audiences to be like, oh, okay, so this is happening here. Maybe that is like possible where I live, kind of thing. So it's almost like, yeah, you need a kind of openness and like like almost just an acceptance and an openness and an understanding, or like I sort of see it more as a surrender in a way, like an allowance or a giving in or a surrendering of my body to just sort of allow things to kind of happen. And I think, like, on a more practical level, I would say I think there definitely needs to be a deeper, wider kind of understanding of what disability is, and look at it through the lens of, for example, like the social model of disability, and yeah, like having a better literacy around that is important and needed. And yeah, I think it's those two things, I would say. I'm not sure that fully answers the question, but like I'm kind of struggling a little bit to I don't know, have like a real sort of fine-tuned idea, because there's lots of things that are needed, I suppose. And I'm sure, like, when we get off this call, I'll be like, oh yeah, there's this and this, but like, yeah.
As I say, it's a really big question to ask it, and doesn't really have any kind of finite answer, does it?
No.
But is always one I really like to ask the artists I'm talking to, because I think it's an important thing to think about when we're asking these questions about rurality and the kind of work that's made there and who gets to experience it and things like that. So you that was a really brilliant. It was really fantastic to hear your thoughts on that question. Thank you for bearing with me on that slightly large way of ending. And
I'm kind of curious to hear what all of the other artists have, how they've responded to that as well. So looking forward to hearing the responses.
And I guess lastly, which is a much more an easier question to answer, which is maybe just tell us, just to finish off, what's your favourite rural space that inspires you currently, and what about that makes it your favourite?
Ooh, that's a good one. I'm only allowed to choose one, so I would probably say Ravenglass, where the sort of spume was born, which is the coastline, and it's a strange little hamlet between it's like near Sellafield, which is like a nuclear power site in southwest Cumbria on the coastline. That's like it's my kind of hidden place. It's the sacred place. It's like the place that I go to like reconnect with the land and reconnect with my body in doing so. So I would, and I actually just I was there at the weekend as well. So, and I got in the sea. So it's sort of fresh in my mind. So I would say, yeah, Ravenglass, but it'll probably change tomorrow.
Oh, Natalie, thank you so much for speaking with me today. It's been absolutely wonderful hearing more about your practice and exploring these kinds of questions about disability and rurality like this. Thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, it's been a pleasure and a hoot. I've really enjoyed myself. So thanks to you for making it so nice, nice and good.
I'm so glad. It's honestly been an absolute pleasure. So yeah, thank you so much.
Of course, yeah.